ਦ ਵੇ ਫੋਰਵਰਡ ਇਸ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੋਸਟ ਹਰਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ। ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਵਿਊਅਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਨਵੇਂ ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ। ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਇਹ ਨਵਾਂ ਸਾਲ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਅਚੀਵਮੈਂਟ ਦੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਨਾਲ, ਇੱਕ ਸਕਸੈਸ ਦੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਨਾਲ, ਇੱਕ ਹੋਪ ਦੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਨਾਲ। ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹਨ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਣਹਾਰ ਯੂਥ ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਸਿੰਘ ਰਾਣਾ। ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ।
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। Shamtej ji has recently been accepted to the prestigious John Hopkins School of Medicine, jithe a neuroscience padhange. He has been selected for a full scholarship program. ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਉਸ ਐਪਲੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 'ਚ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਸਪਾਇਰਿੰਗ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਪਾਥ ਦਿਖਾ ਸਕਣ। ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਜੀ, ਫਸਟ ਆਫ ਆਲ ਕੰਗ੍ਰੈਚੁਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਫॉर ਦਿਸ ਅਚੀਵਮੈਂਟ।
Thank you.
ਸਾਨੂੰ tell us something. So what is it that we are celebrating today?
So high school's finished, almost. I've been selected into some would say extremely prestigious neuroscience program at Johns Hopkins, and I guess we're celebrating that this hard work that I've been putting myself through these last 4 years, they've succeeded, and it's gonna look good.
No, it's an amazing achievement. Tell us something about yourself first. Were you born in New York?
Yeah, I was born in Jamaica Hospital Medical Center a decade ago, and now I was born and raised in Forest Hills in Queens. Used to go to Richmond Hill Gurdwara. And after a while, at the start of my high school, we moved to Long Island, a place called Comac, and there I started looking into the sciences, and I figured out that I wanted to be a neurologist, and so here we are.
Tell us something about your family background. Is there anyone in the field of medicine, or what are they into?
On my mom's side of the family, there's her twin brothers. They're doctors, and one of them is a professor. He teaches medicine, but there hasn't really been a strong medical sort of person in our family, and it was sort of like my parents who they've like struggled coming to the United States, and it was sort of their dream to see me become a doctor, and so I'm sort of paving the way towards that.
And I hope it was your dream as well.
Yeah.
And how did that dream come into being? How did you decide? Did you always want to be a neurosurgeon?
Well, when I was much younger, it was me, like every other kid's dream, to do something fun. And obviously if you ask a kid in elementary school right now, you ask him like, what's fun to you? He's not going to immediately say doctor. But it was sort of my mother in 5th grade, she would tell me, you're going to become a gynecologist. And I didn't understand what that was, right? And so she said, it's the doctor that helps deliver babies, like the most important doctor, because they help deliver babies. And I sort of went with that because I was like, okay, well, it's my mom. She knows what's going on. And so I went with that idea. And then in middle school, I sort of learned what a gynecologist actually was. And that was kind of an embarrassing moment.
All right.
And it was actually then that I started looking at other parts of the health field, and they sort of, like, my parents had this idea that they first put this pressure on me that you should find a job that you want to do that will earn you a lot of money, because they had these struggles that they went through because they didn't have the best jobs, and they didn't have the job security like you would find in the medical field. And so from that, there was sort of this pressure on me to become a doctor or do something important. And as I grew up in middle school, I started looking at the aspects of medicine and what in there I truly thought was something I could do. And I came across a few books that I was reading in terms of like educating myself, and neurology was just something that stuck with me because I saw all of these cases of like all these strange cases of like different symptoms that scientists didn't understand, and I thought, what better thing could I be doing than try and help people who might have these symptoms.
So you were telling me earlier about this book that had a lot of influence on you,
Yeah.
where this person did not have an arm, and his brain would tell him that he could use an arm.
Yeah.
Can you share that story with us?
ठीक है. The book was Phantoms in the Brain by V.S. Ramachandran, I think. I might be wrong. And the idea was about these things called phantom limbs. And it was, so if someone was, normally it's not if you were born without a limb or something, it was if it was removed at some point of your life, it was amputated. Like veterans would have these feelings where they wouldn't have their arm after it was amputated, but they would still feel it. And they would say, like, my arm, I have my arm, it's in a weird position. And it would give them pain, and it wouldn't let them sleep, and they would feel the ability to move their fingers even though they didn't have an arm, or like wiggle their toes if they didn't have a leg. And what happened was that, so Dr. Ramachandran, he came up with a experiment to try and move those arms. And he found, like, if you block off that portion of the person's body and you moved like a figure, then like a shape of an arm next to it, it would feel as though it was their own arm. And he sort of started looking at the ways in which you could trick the brain into feeling things that weren't actually happening. And so in some ways he could make people's amputated arms move to them. And I thought that was really inspiring, because there was like veterans who served their country, and they like gave all these sacrifices, and then they were struggling with this pain, and no one else could figure out a solution for it, and then he did. And I sort of thought that was inspiring.
And that was something which laid the foundation for your interest in neuroscience.
Yeah. That was the first book, and then I started reading on from there, and there was a lot of other things that started to critique my interest.
Shamtej ji, ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ selection process hai, for a school like John Hopkins, it's very competitive. So can you tell us what do you think makes a strong application for these schools?
Yeah, there's a lot of people, you'll ask them and they'll say, oh, it's all about academics, or it's all about your grades, and you have to do good in school. And I think that although that is a good thing that sets you apart from a crowd, it's more about what impact you're making to like the community around you, and who you have bonds with, and the story that you've developed for yourself over the course of your life. For a lot of people that I know, there's this stress of like figure out these academics, but there's no like extracurricular activity that is defining who they are. For me, it was fencing and the Guru Nanak Darbar's soup kitchen, the Monday night one. It was experiences in both those places, and my research and work experience during summers in between high school grades that sort of set me apart from the rest of the applicant pool. There was, if say a school such as Hopkins, which is prestigious, takes, it has like this big group of kids to look at, and they all have great SAT scores and great high school scores and all of this that is the same. They want to look for kids who will come to their campus and will bring a change, something positive to their campus. And so I think that anybody who's planning on applying, they should find something that they're good at and they're passionate about, and that should be a focus throughout their application.
And when does this process begin? At what time of the year? And
so I started my college process at the end of 10th grade.
At the end of 10th grade?
Yeah, okay. At the end of 10th grade, I started researching colleges that had programs in the field that I wanted to study. And I looked for where I had my best chances of applying and where I had my worst. And
at that time, you were pretty decided on neuroscience?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay if like you don't have a decision on what you want to major in, but you should know what general field you want to be looking into.
At least you know that you want to be a doctor.
Yeah. Like if you know you want to do something science or medicine related, you're applying to a different set of schools than someone who's doing literature or history. So I thought, I knew beforehand that I was going to do something medical or in the sciences, and that's when I started looking into schools such as Johns Hopkins, and I took this long list of like 35 schools and I condensed it into what schools I thought I had the best chance of getting into.
Shamtej ji will talk more about this after a short break. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ The Way Forward. The Way Forward is ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੋਸਟ ਹਰਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਸਿੰਘ ਰਾਣਾ ਜੀ ਨਾਲ, ਜੋ ਇੱਕ community the young Sikh ladke hege who has been accepted into a neuroscience program at the prestigious John Hopkins program, John Hopkins University, right? Let's go.
Yeah.
Shamtej, for our kids who are right now in the 9th, 10th standard, 11th standards, right? I understand before that, mostly in 9th and 10th standards, what is it that they should start doing which can strengthen their applications to these schools?
So a good thing to get ahead on is your influence in the community. So some students do it through in-school clubs, some students do it through their church or their gurdwara. Some kids do it through some sort of work experience, but there should always be something that you're doing that will teach you something new. So even if it's a research opportunity or if it's working at a local restaurant, something that will teach you how to work with other people or some new skill. For me, I worked at a manufacturing firm in Farmingdale.
Okay.
And what I did was I was working with another group of students and working with their manufacturing portion of their company, and we were coming up with ways to make the work that was happening on their factory floor more efficient. So when I talked about that in my application, I sort of brought interest to the skills that I developed there, like learning to code and working with a group of people and how to solve like these complex problems. And I think that any student, like anyone really who's looking to shine against other students on their application, it's something like that they have to do. In-school clubs, running for officer positions, becoming the president of like a human rights club or some sort of school initiative that brings emphasis to your role as a leader in your community. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, so it's not just pure academics which influence your application. They see how motivated you are, how dedicated you are, how passionate you are about your interests. Shamtej ji, one thing I would like you to throw some light upon is, these schools are expensive, right? And we understand there are some scholarship programs like the Quest Bridge or Posse. Did you get the benefit of any of these scholarships or?
So I didn't apply through any program such as like Quest Bridge or Posse, but Johns Hopkins was a special. It had a special place on my list because they recently got a donation from Bloomberg. They got a very large amount of money that they were supposed to use for infrastructure and education and for financial aid for students such as me who wouldn't be able to go to the school if I didn't receive some sort of aid. And so things like that, sometimes it's dependent on how much your family's making or what their financial status is. In my case, my family doesn't have the best financial status, so because of that, I got some aid from the government through FAFSA and CSS.
Okay.
And those are applications that most students should fill out regardless of their financial state because it'll help some way. the Hopkins gave me money to go to the school just from that Bloomberg donation because of my financial situation and because of my academics. So that's why I received financial aid.
And for availing those other scholarships like Posse and Questbridge you just mentioned, is there a process involved? Do they make these applications like beforehand? How does that work?
I don't know much about Posse, but for Questbridge, I know that most colleges will have their application for the college and financial aid due around November, December for an early decision application.
Okay.
Which is it's like ahead of a time. It's like a big commitment application because if you get in, you're required to go by law. But for Questbridge, they expect it in, I think it's early September, mid-September, and I think the way that works is they look at your financial circumstance and they look at your grades and they match you up with schools. And you make a list of schools that you would consider going to, and then they give you 100% scholarship for one of those schools if you get accepted.
Shamtej, if we talk about guidance for our youngsters, for knowing about these programs, knowing about these scholarships, and helping them with their applications, what would you say is the best resource? Is it like something in the community? Is it your school teachers, or is it something else you took benefit of?
A good place to go to start off if you need a general idea, I would say, is really just start by searching like Google and get a general idea of how college admissions and financial aid work. Start by like watching YouTube videos, like figuring out, like create a foundation for yourself, and then go to your guidance office in your high school or talk to your teachers, and they can give you a more specific plan, and they can help you plan it out.
How helpful were the teachers at your school with your achievement?
Well, a lot of my teachers would point out the colleges that they've gone to or the programs that they've heard of, and they would point out that it'd be a good idea to apply to those programs. Fellow students would also, like upperclassmen who got into college recently, they would tell you what programs they got into, how they applied, and you would learn from them. But I think definitely my guidance counselor and our guidance department, they helped me plan out how I was going to go about applying and what steps I had to take that I couldn't find information on online in order to...
Did they help you with your application, with your essay and all that stuff?
Yeah, for my Common App essay and for my supplemental essays for Johns Hopkins, I had teachers read them and review them and give me feedback. And I think that it helped a lot because it helped me figure out what I was telling to the admissions officers who would be reviewing my application. And that helped me send the right message so that I looked like a better applicant.
Shamtej, at this stage, which is right after your high school, does your work experience matter in your application?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Because the work experience that I had was a lot of research-based stuff, I think that finding research opportunities and mentorships in college will be much easier. I'll have like a foundation in like figuring things out instead of learning them that I think mentors and researchers will see as a positive aspect of taking me in as a research student.
And we understand Johns Hopkins has a huge focus on research, along with pure academics, right? There's something else I would like to ask you. We feel very proud and very happy to see you in this group. Has that worked in either way? Have you ever felt any hindrance, or has that helped you in any way? How does that work?
I think it does both. In academic settings where I'm with a group of people who are academics and are smart and don't have like any aspect of ignorance, they see it as some sort of balance or some structure to my life that can be taken positively and can be seen as a person with a good work ethic. But in other cases, like sometimes with peers and in my like journey through high school, I've had issues where other students didn't understand the importance of my identity and the way I look. And like I've been in like fights, I've been in arguments, there's been problems that have stemmed from it, but I think that overall I've learned that showing this identity is something that helps me stay ahead in a sense, and it helps me find the good in people who might be ignorant or don't understand Sikhi the way that I hope that they might one day. And I think that it's important for kids of our faith to continue to look past problems that may arise from their identity and use it as something that strengthens who they are instead of weakens it.
ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖਾਂਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜੀ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ। ਦ ਵੇ ਫਾਰਵਰਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੋਸਟ ਹਰਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਰਾਣਾ ਜੀ ਨਾਲ, who has been accepted to a neuroscience program at prestigious John Hopkins University. और ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਜੀ ਅੱਗੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਨਿਊਰੋ ਸਰਜਨ ਬਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਸ ਲਈ ਕੁਝ ਸਵਾਲ ਹਨ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 'ਚ, ਔਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਇਨਵਾਈਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਨਿਊਰੋਲੋਜਿਸਟ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਕਵਨੀਤ ਕੌਰ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ, who is a board certified neurologist and presently doing her fellowship in vascular neurology. डॉक्टर साहब ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਜੀ ਕੁਝ ਸਵਾਲ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 'ਚ, ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਵਾਬ ਹਨ ਉਹ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਦਿਓ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਬਾਕੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਏਜ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਦੇ ਯੰਗ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਗਾਈਡੈਂਸ ਮਿਲ ਸਕੇ। ਤੇ ਕੀ ਸਟੈਪ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਫਟਰ 4 years of college? What would be the next step for him to go into that line?
So right now talking about 4 years of college and then pursuing medical school, which part is missing. I'm coming from India, so after we do our 12th we go directly to our medical school, but here you have to go through that process. So application of medical school and then finishing up medical school and then looking forward for residency and then fellowship training. So process of medical school training is different than applying for residency. I think I can talk more about after medical school, what is the process, because that's when I came to United States and my experience started. So
I think that's where we have seen, I being a layman, I've seen most of our, at least the people I personally know, struggle with their residencies and observerships and rotations. I don't know what those things are. And can you tell us, so after we finish the medical school, right? So you have to go for residency?
after medical school you are looking for residency.
Okay, and is that a competitive process?
It is definitely a competitive program these days.
Okay.
So depending on what field you want to go to, it gets tougher and tougher. But I would say that the process here and in any country starts when you are in medical school, because you have to plan your clerkships accordingly, what field you're interested in, and as you are doing your clerkships you have to figure out what you are interested in and what you want to pursue in your life. So for that
I'm sorry, what is this clerkship?
So clerkship are your clinical rotations, and those are started I think after second year of med school or end of second year. That's what we started at the end of second year in India.
So does the school help, or you arrange that yourself?
School helps, and there are options of electives which you can choose on your own, and that I think every school gives you option, because with that rotation you will see that really what you're interested in, do you really like it? So that makes a big of a difference, because just reading from the books is different, and going through the clinical rotation, seeing those patients is completely different. Because
So you mean they would go through different departments like neurology and eyes and gynecology and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I always say the students who rotate with me when I was doing my residency is the first step is you have to figure out medical versus surgical field. Have you decided, do you like medical field or do you like surgical field? I per se, when I was in medical school, I always knew that I'm not going into surgical field. I always liked medicine, thinking part, and doing my duties in that sense. So once you figure out that part, medical versus surgical, then you can see what kind of medicine or surgery you like. The students who rotate with us in neurology, they rotate neurology and neurosurgery, if we are talking about neurosciences, right one after each other, because there is a lot of difference. It is called a bigger picture neuroscience, but neurology is the medicine part and neurosurgery is surgical part, and that too relating to the brain and the spine. So that process starts, and then applying for residency, you have to go through USMLE, which is a United States Medical Licensing Examination. It has 3 steps. First one is step 1, then step 2 has 2 parts, step 2 CK and step 2 CS, and the third one is step 3. And it's a big thing. People talk about, hey, how much scores you got. Score is a big thing. It is a competitive exam, I would say. It's nerve-wracking. It's very stressful to go through. But if you strive through that process really well, I think you will ease your process going further. So licensing exams do make a difference.
Shamtej, do you have any questions for Dr. Kaur?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering. I've heard a lot of other like family friends experiences with like which classes are going to be most stressful. What will I be like looking forward to? What's going to stress me out? What's going to go on in medical school?
So I think the most students enjoy, or me looking back, was the first year when you go in medical school. It's all about sciences. You are just reading through the books, there's no patient encounters, there's nothing like that. And then by the end of first year, maybe you get bored and you want to see patients, you want to see real patients. So second year is very enthusiastic. You start seeing patients by the end of second year. And then you start defining your thoughts in the way where you will have some alignment, I would say. That just comes but natural. But side by side, you have to start thinking about your steps, which people take by end of second year. They start preparing for their step 1 of USMLE. So that kind of, I think it's nerve-wracking. But I would say you would enjoy clinical rotations more than just sitting and reading the books.
Let me ask something. So the way Shamtej told us that to get into the school to improve your application, it's not just academics, right? You bring other things into the picture. So for selection into residencies and observerships or even clerkships, do they look at anything other than your scores?
Definitely. I would say scores does not matter, and that's not the only thing which matters. You gotta build up your resume or CV, what we call, with observerships, which people do it after they finish medical school, but also while you are doing your clerkships, you can find a good mentor, which I think helps a lot. With mentor, you can have some exchange of thoughts, and then thinking about some research, what we can do. Can we go towards clinical research? Can we go towards basic science research? I would just say grab any opportunity you get, because and it's a general rule of life, grabbing and recognizing the opportunity. Whatever adds to your resume and whatever interests you, just don't let it go.
Shamtej, do you have any follow-ups on that? Any further clarifications?
Do you think that maybe, like, what kinds of research opportunities am I going to be looking at? Like, you said, like, clinical, or I didn't hear the other one. Those kinds of research opportunities, are they going to like build on my the things that I'd be learning in like a college seminar, or would there be different information that I'd apply when I'm actually like working in a hospital?
So two types of research, as I said, clinical and basic science, which are the broader aspects. Basic science you're going to get when you're in your medical school performing with different labs, physiology department, you get to go to those labs. You're going to get those opportunities there. But when you are doing your clerkships, you're going to get clinical research experience unless you have a department, like some people have rotations with the basic science research department included in them. So that's different. But mostly you have to identify clinical research opportunities while in the hospital, and I think the best person or the best people who can guide you will be the current residents. Attendings, the faculty does help, but they are there for a limited time period, and then they have to teach residents and the fellows. So the best person, the best friend you can make is the residents in the hospital. They can get you involved in so many research projects because they're also in direct contact with their attendings and their faculty and other departments. So that way you can get many opportunities.
Are those clinical research opportunities, are they case study based, or would it be like you are following like a doctor around and seeing the patients that they're dealing with and how to help them?
Sure. So while in clinical hospital setting, we do case reports, we do case series, we do abstracts, we have our registries. Like for example, I'm in strokes, we have stroke registry, so we can look up the patients which we are thinking. You just have to have an idea what you're going to publish, what is different. And you will hear that in rounds in the hospital when you are seeing patients, hey, this is different, this is not seen regularly. So then you go home and research, do your research at home on Google, or Google Scholar is the best one, best platform. And then you see if this is not reported or if this is something new, I should report it.
And for fellowship, is that again a competitive process, or anyone gets into that?
I would say from my experience out loud, but fellowship is a little easier to get in compared to residency. I would say residency, it's like the bottleneck. Getting into residency is tougher, and once you are in residency and you know what is entrusted to you, what you are interested in, you can get into fellowship.
Doctor, we understand that you are currently in a fellowship program studying stroke. Right now, we'll take advantage of that. Can you tell us something about stroke? What is stroke?
So stroke, we joke around. It's called the brain attack. Like people know about heart attacks, but people don't know much about brain attacks. It's like brain gets supply of oxygen and nutrients via blood, and when that blood flow is disrupted, you get what is called stroke. Stroke is like a sudden onset of any symptoms. It has two parts. It can be hemorrhagic or ischemic. So hemorrhage is 20% of all the strokes, which is like if there is a rupture of blood vessels, and ischemic forms 80% of all strokes, which is like if there is clot inside the blood vessels. So any which way, if your blood supply is disrupting your oxygen and nutrients to the brain, that causes stroke. So it's very important to recognize and know about stroke, because you will be amazed, it's one of the leading cause of death and disability throughout the world. People don't know much about it. In United States per se, it's the #1 cause of disability, and the 5th leading cause of mortality in United States.
Doctor, we'll ask you more about strokes after a short break. So see देखते रहो The Way Forward. The Way Forward is ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ host Harjot Singh. So Dr. Kaur, before going to the break, you were telling us about stroke. So what are the signs of stroke? How do we know that somebody is having a stroke?
So I always tell my patients and the community out, there is a very nice abbreviation from American Stroke Association, FAST, F-A-S-T. F for face. If you see anyone drooping or any asymmetry of the face, and it's sudden onset, you should doubt or you should consider stroke. Anyone out in the community. A for arm. Arm, one side arm numbness, weakness. If someone says, my arm just doesn't feel right, or it's very numb, I can't feel my arm or leg, you should suspect stroke. Any unilaterality. Then as for speech, if someone is talking to you and suddenly their speech is mumbling, or they're saying some garbled speech, or people say it's very slurry, you can't understand their words, or you can understand what they're saying, or their speech does not make any sense. It's like a word salad. You should suspect stroke. And then T is for time. It's time to call 911 or the emergency services anywhere. And as I said, time is brain. You know, every second or every minute lost, you lose 1.8 million neurons.
Okay.
1.8 million neurons are lost every minute a stroke is caused. So it's very important to recognize those symptoms and call EMS, or if the patients are in the hospital, we do our education system for the community and the house staff out there, for our nursing, to recognize those symptoms and alarm.
So doctor, all four of them, all three symptoms show up together, or it can be any of them?
So there are different syndromes of the brain according to the arterial supply, blood supply, which areas are supplied. These are one of the major symptoms, but there are many symptoms out there, like alteration of consciousness, anyone just losing consciousness all of a sudden, vomiting, loss of balance, things like that. They all come in a congregation of symptoms, which we can, how the patients present, we can think, we can judge where the stroke is caused and which artery is blocked or ruptured. So, but these are the main ones which are easier to be recognized by community.
And you know, once we see that somebody is having a stroke, or I don't know if the person who's feeling this himself can take any steps, any preventive action or something. What is it that we should do immediately?
So immediately I would say call the emergency system, 911 for sure, or wherever, which part of the country they are in, which country they are in. People, because I said 80% of strokes are caused by clot in the blood vessels, so people tend to say, and we say that take aspirin if you have at home. If that's a bleeding stroke, then obviously hospital system is the one where you can get it diagnosed which type of stroke it is. But yeah, taking aspirin can help.
So if I ask you, so what is it that we can do to prevent? Is aspirin one of the things?
So prevention is a complete different part of stroke which we talk. There are 4 levels of prevention, as we know: primordial, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So I would say to everyone, just taking care of your health. Simple ways to take care of your health is like checking your blood pressure. Just managing your blood pressure and keeping it in normal range can decrease your chances of stroke by 50%. That's a huge number, or maybe more than that, right? And then checking your cholesterol like 6 monthly or so, or if you have bad cholesterol, keep that in normal range with medications like statins. Checking for diabetes, that's very common. Doing exercise, eating healthy diet. These days, DASH diet, Mediterranean diet, they're out and they do help. DASH diet for hypertension, just taking low sodium, taking servings of fruits and vegetables, that does help. So just simple ways of taking care of your health. Reducing weight, that's very easy things to say, tougher to do, but they do help. They do make a difference. Just controlling these measures.
I'm sure Shamtej would be coming up with new ideas. And Shamtej, do you have anything you would like to ask Dr. Kaur?
Yeah, there's actually one question I've been meaning to ask you, and it's how is your experience with medicine and all the studies that you've been doing, how has it affected your relationship with Sikhi in terms of how maybe the ideas might contradict or support the ideas?
So, medicine per se, I think I feel very blessed to have chosen this field. Service to God is service to humanity. My father used to say that, used to teach me that always. And that was, I think, my first line in my personal statement. So, per se, medicine, Bhai Kanhaiya ji or Guru Sikhi and everything teaches that. So medicine per se for sure. But being in neurology also, I think I feel blessed because that's written and taught in our Gurbani. You should have control of your mind and still be living your life. You should be meditating on God and leading your life in a society. That's taught in our Gurbani and by our gurus, but I think that's where neurology comes into play because our daily life is formed of three modalities maybe. One is thinking from our frontal lobes, right? Thinking, thought process and all. And then second is emotions. And then third, combining those two, which way you are gonna go. Right, so I think that comes from neurology because whole of your body is controlled by your brain. I always say to my husband, neurons over nephrons, cerebrals over coronaries, but this is true. A whole of your body is controlled by your brain, and if you know, as our guru said, if you know how to control your mind,
Man jeete jag jeet.
Man jeete jag jeet. There is way forward. There's there is bright light. So neurology, being in neurology, I feel really blessed and closer to Sikhi, as in you just want to keep your mind in control.
As a follow-up on that, there are recent researches which tell us that neurons control our reaction to circumstances, right? They control our temper, our attitude, and all that stuff. And I don't know if Shamtej is getting to that because we see that vis-a-vis hukum and controls. But I would understand maybe the way your neurons are structured is something that might be controlled by some supernatural power as well, right?
So there is our primitive brain and there's modernized brain. Primitive brain is like limbic system, and maybe more modern brain is like your frontal lobes, and there's feedback system. So your basic ids are coming from your limbic system, aggression, any reaction. If a child hits you, you tend to hit the child back, but then your frontal lobes kick in. Hey, no, you are a mature person. The child doesn't know that. So that's where controlling and pushing and giving negative feedback to that primitive brain is it's very peculiar to human brain. It's not there in animal brains. So that's very we should be proud of, right?
Yeah. That's where they say maybe the superior position held by a human being amongst all living beings. Dr. Kaur, Shamtej is a young, bright boy who is just starting his path into the medical field. What advice would you like to give him at this stage?
So I would say, first of all, be comfortable in what you have chosen. I can say from my experience, you are in right field. It's the best field you can serve humanity, being a Sikh. What the Sikh meaning is, it's bringing into action the meaning of Sikh, and just be ready that going forward, medicine is not easy, and the way it's formed in that sense is because you are taking care of other human beings, so they have to grill you. It's going to be physically, emotionally very stressful, but also at the end of all your training period, you will feel so confident and you will just enjoy it when you treat your patients, and you know it becomes a reflex. You do not have to think of certain things. It becomes a reflex the way we are trained in United States.
Dr. Sahab, thank you very much for those words. ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਵਿਊਅਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਅਗਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਫ ਯੂ ਵਾਂਟ ਟੂ ਰੀਚ ਆਊਟ ਟੂ ਸ਼ਮਤੇਜ ਔਰ ਯੂ ਵਾਂਟ ਟੂ ਰੀਚ ਆਊਟ ਟੂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਕੌਰ ਆਸਕ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਸਕੂਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਐਡਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਕੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਸੀਗਾ ਐਂਡ ਇਫ ਯੂ ਵਾਂਟ ਟੂ ਲਰਨ ਐਨੀਥਿੰਗ ਫਰੋਮ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਕੌਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਈਮੇਲਸ ਥੱਲੇ ਡਿਸਪਲੇਡ ਹਨ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਰੀਚ ਆਊਟ ਟੂ them you can ask your questions. Shamtej, Dr. Ko, thank you very much for taking out your time. आज साढ़े नाल गल करने वास्ते, साढ़े viewers नूं दस्सण वास्ते, thank you so much. We appreciate. AC साढ़ा आज दा episode, तुसी वेखते रहो the way forward.